Are you ever in situations where you don't understand something, but you don't know how to tell the other person? So you just stand there thinking, I don't understand what they're saying. What should I do? Don't worry, this is a very common situation for all language learners. In this video, I'll give you 30 useful phrases that you can use in these situations to help you understand what the other person is saying so you never have to feel worried again. Let's get started with our first category, which is phrases to say that you don't understand. The first one, I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Notice how this sounds much more polite than I don't understand. We soften it a little bit more, but it's still very clear. I'm not sure I understand what you mean. See how it's more polite, but we still get our idea across? The next one, I'm afraid I don't quite follow. Or you can say, I'm afraid I don't quite follow you. If you don't follow someone, it means you don't understand what they're saying. You can't follow their idea. And that phrase, I'm afraid, softens it a little bit more. So if you put that at the beginning, it helps you to sound more polite. I'm afraid I don't quite follow you. The next one, sorry, I'm a little lost. If you tell someone that you're a little lost, they will understand that you don't know what they're saying. And again, we're softening it by putting sorry at the beginning. Another one, sorry, I didn't quite get that. If you don't get something, it's another way of saying I don't understand. I didn't get that. I didn't understand what you said. And the last one, I'm afraid I didn't understand very well. Again, see how this phrase is so much more polite than just saying, I don't understand. You're using I'm afraid to soften it, to sound more polite, even using very well at the end. It just makes you sound a bit more friendly, but still, you're getting the point across. I'm afraid I didn't understand very well. The next thing you might have to do as a language learner is ask someone to speak more slowly or more clearly. Here are some phrases that you can use to do that. Could you slow down a little? I'm having trouble keeping up. Having trouble keeping up means the person is speaking fast and you can't understand everything they say. Remember, if we use could you, it's a little bit more polite than saying can you. Could you slow down a little? The next one. Sorry, that was a bit fast for me. Could you speak a bit more slowly? Another way we can soften requests like this is to use a bit. It was a bit fast. Could you speak a bit more slowly? Another way to ask this is, would you mind? And remember, if we use the phrase would you mind, we need to use ing afterwards. Would you mind speaking a little bit more slowly, please? Another way to ask that is could you? Could you speak a little bit more slowly, please? If the person you're speaking to is using language, vocabulary that's quite complicated that you don't understand, you could ask, could you say that in simpler terms, please? Simpler terms means more basic language, basic vocabulary. So if you ask someone to say it again in simpler terms, they should explain it more clearly. With vocabulary, you can hopefully understand. The next category is phrases for asking for clarification. If someone says something and you're not 100% sure you understood, you want them to perhaps say it again, but in a different way, these are some things you can say. I'm not sure I'm following. Could you explain that in a different way? Again, we're using the following. I'm not following. I'm not understanding you. Could you explain it in a different way? Sorry, I didn't quite understand. Could you give me some more details? This is a good one if maybe someone's giving you information, but you don't really understand in enough detail what they're saying. Sorry, I didn't quite understand. Could you give me some more details? Another way we can ask someone to clarify something more simply is, could you break that down for me, please? If you break something down, you say it step by step in simple chunks so the other person can understand more easily. I'm not quite clear on what you mean. Could you clarify that for me? To be clear on something means to understand it, to have it clear in your mind. But if you're not, you can say, I'm not quite clear on what you mean. And the last one is something you can say if someone gives you information, but it's not enough. You need more. You can use the word elaborate. Could you elaborate on that, please? If someone elaborates, it means they give more details. If you're enjoying this video and finding these phrases useful, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more English language learning content just like this. Now let's continue with the video with our next category. Now we are looking at phrases to use to ask someone to repeat, asking for repetition. It's very common that you might want someone to say something again. Instead of the basic, can you repeat? Let's look at some better ways you can ask this question. Could you please say that one more time? Sorry, I missed that. Could you repeat it? If you miss something, it means you didn't hear the first time. I missed it. Could you repeat? Would you mind repeating that last part? Again, we're using would you mind and the ing, repeating. Would you mind repeating that last part? I didn't quite catch what you said. Could you go over it again? If you don't catch something, it means you don't hear it. I didn't catch it. I didn't hear it. Could you say it again? Or could you go over it again, meaning the same thing? Could you repeat? And the last one is nice and simple. I'm sorry, could you say that again, please? It's quite simple, it's quite to the point, but it is more polite than just saying, can you repeat? I'm sorry, could you say that again, please? The next category is phrases you can use for checking understanding. If someone says something to you and you want to check that you really understood what they said, sometimes it's good to repeat back what they told you, and this is a good way of checking. For example, let me just confirm, are you saying that? And then you would repeat what they said in your own words. So if I understand correctly, you're saying that, again, you repeat in your own words what you understood. Just to clarify, do you mean, if you ask someone, what do you mean? Or do you mean this? It's a good way to check that you understood the message of what they said. Am I right in thinking that you're saying, this is a nice polite one, so just to check that you really understood the other person? Am I right in thinking that? And the last one, a really useful phrase, in other words. So in other words, you're saying, in other words is a really useful phrase if you ever want to rephrase or summarize what someone said. In other words, you repeat what they said, but in your own words. The final category is phrases to use for asking for help in understanding something. These can be used in lots of different situations, but especially when you want the other person to help you understand something that isn't clear to you. For example, could you help me understand that better? We're being polite because we're saying, could you help me understand that better? Can you walk me through that again? If you walk someone through something, you explain it to them, usually in a nice, clear, concise way. Can you walk me through that again? Can you explain simply again? Would you mind explaining that to me in a bit more detail? This is another one that could be used if the other person gave you some information, but it's not enough. You need more information, more details to really understand. Could you help me get a clearer picture of what you mean? If you have a clear picture of something, it means you have a clear understanding. You understand it very well. If you don't understand, maybe you need to get a clearer picture, and that can happen with the other person giving more details or explaining more clearly. And the final one, could you go over the main idea again, please? This is if you've received a lot of information and perhaps you just want to get the main details, the main idea. If you ask them to go over it again, it means they will repeat, perhaps using more simple terms this time. So now you have 30 phrases to use when you don't understand someone. If you want another 30 useful phrases for everyday English conversation, I recommend that you watch this video next.